name is John Wilcox, and this is Redeeming the Fathers of America. What would you do if you thought you were the only political voice in your state that was driven to acquire freedom from the tyrannical grip of a distant government? Would you give up, or would you double down and risk it all by pressing forward? This is the reality that Reverend Lyman Hall found himself. Yes, here was another of our founders who had been trained in theology and then shifted into politics. But there is so much more to his life story. Lyman was born to Reverend John Hall and Mary Street in Wallingford, Connecticut, April 12, 1724. His mother was the great-granddaughter of Reverend Nicholas Street, so it was quite natural that his parents would groom him for a pulpit ministry in the Congregationalist Church. Young Lyman graduated from Yale in 1747. Then he was tutored in theology for 2 years by his uncle, Reverend Samuel Hall. In 1749, he began to preach in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The date he accepted the call was the 15th of August, and on September 27th, he was ordained by the Fairfield West Consociation. However, the celebration was short-lived when the protest was raised by 11 members of the church and 5 others of the congregation against proceeding with the ordination. This caused his brief pastorate to be a stormy one, and on the 18th of June, 1751, he was dismissed by the Consociation after hearing charges against his moral character, which appear to have been supported by proof and also by his own confession. At the same time, the Consociation, in evidence of their confidence in his repentance, expressly voted his restoration to good standing in the ministry. And he continued for at least 2 years by filling vacant pulpits. At some point before these events, Reverend Hall turned his interest to the profession of medicine. On May 20, 1752, Lyman married Abigail Burr of Fairfield. But their life together was cut short when she died on July 8, 1753. Lyman suffered much over his loss, and 4 years later moved to Dorchester, South Carolina, not far from Charleston, where a settlement of Massachusetts Puritans had been planted since 1697. When Hall arrived, these settlers were in the process of moving to the Midway district of Georgia, which is now known as Liberty County. Although Lyman Hall's abilities were varied, he favored himself as a farmer above all else. He established a medical practice in the town of Sudbury, Georgia, about 30 miles southwest of Savannah. With the demand for Dr. Hall's skill in medicine, he soon became one of her leading citizens. As the Revolution approached, we must keep in mind that Georgia was still loyal to the British Empire in hopes of protection against Indians, Spanish, French, and other Georgians. When the Constitutional Convention of 1774 was called for, Georgia refused to send any of its delegates. With an eye to the future, Lyman Hall began to hold meetings at the now famous Tondy's Tavern on July 24, 1774, and the second on August 10, 1774. It was at this second meeting that the so-called radicals, including Lyman Hall, proposed sending delegates to the Constitutional Convention, forming in Philadelphia. The proposal was defeated, but this did not stop the movement. Soon 4 parishes, St. John's, St. Andrew, St. George, and St. David, sent representatives to the meeting and selected Lyman Hall as a delegate to the Continental Congress. After this, an attempt by Georgians loyal to the crown engaged these radical elements of the colonial government. That too failed. Lyman continued to press forward by attempting to align his parish with their more radical neighbors in South Carolina. What followed was a plan to boycott the import of slaves at the harbor of Savannah, a direct action against those loyal to the king. This boycott quickly expanded to include essential products that could easily be purchased in South Carolina and shipped to Sudbury, which was the shallow draft port of St. John Parish. Dr. Hall was elected by the parish to represent it at the Continental Congress, but refused because he had not been elected by the entire state. However, he purchased with his own money, food and gunpowder for the relief of Massachusetts, who had suffered much under the present revolt and resulting attacks from the British. It was May 1775 when Lyman Hall traveled to Philadelphia and entered the chambers of Independence Hall. Even though the entire state of Georgia had declined to send delegates, the people of St. John's Parish succeeded in convincing Dr. Hall to attend the Second Continental Congress. It was not until January of 1776 when Georgia finally organized a provincial Congress. The next month, Lyman's good friends, Button Gwinnett and George Walton, stood by his side in representing the Georgia colony and signed the Declaration of Independence on August 2, 1776. The Crown immediately accused Lyman of high treason, and as a result, both his Midway rice plantation and Sudbury House were burned, and his slaves confiscated during the British occupation of 1780. On the advice of General Washington, he took his wife and son and fled the state until the British left, staying with family in Charleston and in Connecticut. When the British finally left Georgia, Hall resumed his medical practice in 1782 and was elected governor of the state of Georgia by the General Assembly on January 9, 1783. Among his first priorities were the rebuilding of a government and court system which had been destroyed during the Revolution. On July 8, 1783, Governor Hall addressed the Georgia legislature in Augusta and called upon them to enact wholesome laws restraining vice and to encourage the introduction of religion and learned clergy to perform divine worship in honor of God, and to cultivate the principles of religion and virtue among our citizens. This suggestion paved the way for the foundation and future of the University of Georgia. Reverend Charles A. Goodrich described Lyman Hall in this following excerpt. Dr. Hall, in his person, was tall and well-proportioned. In his manners, he was easy, and in his deportment, dignified and courteous. He was by nature characterized for a warm and enthusiastic disposition, which, however, was under the guidance of a sound discretion. His mind was active and discriminating, ardent in his own feelings. He possessed the power of exciting others to action. And though in Congress he acted not so conspicuous a part as many others, yet his example and his exertions, especially in connection with those of the inhabitants of the circumscribed parish of St. John, powerfully contributed to the final accession of the whole colony of Georgia to the Confederacy, thus presenting in array against the mother country the whole number of her American colonies. Thank you for watching Redeeming the Fathers of America.